Hello, Facebook fans and YouTube fans of DX Engineering. It is Thursday afternoon here in the Eastern time zone of the USA. It's 1830 Zulu on June 13th, 2024. And this is the Manufacturer Showcase brought to you by DX Engineering. This is a show where we talk to one of the over 175 different manufacturers that DX Engineering represents and sells. And today we have Scott, W4PA from Vibraplex. Hello, Scott.
Tim, great to see you again.
Great to see you. Scott, you have some exciting things going on at your company all the time, but today let's talk about the Matt Tuner products.
Okay, be happy to. Matt Tuner, if you're not familiar with them, is a company that builds automatic antenna tuners based in Taiwan. We've been their U.S. representative since 2019, and DX Engineering has been carrying them as a sub-distributor for us since 2020. There's several different models available for various ICOM, Kenwood, and Yaesu transceivers, anywhere from 100 to 200 watts. But Matt Tuner has come out with some new products this year, a couple of which we showed at Dayton, and a third one, which we did not show at Dayton, that we were showing here on this for the first time.
All right, well, let's go straight to the good stuff, for the new stuff. Scott, what's new and what do you have to show?
Okay, so the two new tuners, the first one we'll talk about is called the Matt 50. Matt has had a tuner out for several years now called the Matt 40. And the Matt 40 is a outdoor long wire feed point automatic antenna tuner. It's got a long wire lug nut on one side, SO239 on the other side for connecting coax, and a control cable. I'll show you what one looks like from this side. If you look at this, this is the back end of the Matt 40 and the Matt 50. You can see this is for connecting perhaps a wire vertical antenna outdoors, ground connection. The Matt 40 uses a dedicated control cable that is controlled by the tune button on ICOM, Kenwood, and Yaesu transceivers at a length of 10 meters or 33 feet long. So you plug that into your HF transceiver, put the weatherproof unit outside, use it to tune the wire. Now, this has been a very popular item for us, but a lot of comments have been made to us and to Matt Tuner over the last couple of years about, I really don't want to have to control this with a 33-foot long control cable because it's not convenient, because I want to put it somewhere further away from that. And there's really not a good way to add an extension cable onto that. So having relayed that to Matt Tuner, they have now come out with a new version of the same tuner called the Matt 50. And the Matt 50 outdoor unit is the same as that used with the Matt 40, with one exception. On this side, we've got an SO239 connector and nothing else. On the Matt 40 version, there was a power plug that had the control cable interface on it. This one uses 12 volts DC injected on the coax line with a bias T to control the tuner. Now, how that's accomplished is, instead of using a cable plugged into the external automatic antenna tuner jack on the radio, they're using a small control head in the shack. And I've got one of these here. This is the control head for the Matt 50. There are control heads for ICOM, Kenwood, and Yaesu transceivers. On the back here, you can see we've got a control jack that goes to the transceiver, external antenna tuner jack, input and output SO239s in the back as well. All you do is connect this to the external antenna tuner jack on the radio, connect the coax cable between the radio and the head, and then this other connector is the output connector that goes out at pretty much whatever length that you want out to the outdoor remote tuner.
Wow. So, Scott, let's talk about power handling capability. How much power can this handle, and what frequencies does this new tuner work on?
Okay, this one is 160 to 6 meters, so 1.8 to 54 megahertz, 120 watts SSB CW, 30 watts digital modes, which is typical for Matt Tuner's external antenna tuner specs. One other thing I wanted to mention about the Matt 50 as well was one issue with the Matt 40 was that if you didn't have an ICOM, Kenwood, or Yaesu transceiver with a dedicated external antenna tuner control interface, there was no way to use the tuner because there wasn't a manual mode available for it. That's another thing that they've built into now to this control head is if you don't have an interface, all you have to do is apply 12 volts DC to the box. You can see there's a 12 to 14 volt DC power connector on the back. You put 12 volts on there, and then the bias T in the box will then inject out on the coax line. And how you would control it is manual. You simply turn the power down on the transceiver down to 10 watts, hit the tune button, it actuates the tuner outside, instead of doing that automatically with the external antenna tuner transceiver cable.
So, Scott, would this tuner in its single wire configuration be a good match for like an end-fed half wave?
Not necessarily end-fed half wave. No, what it's primarily used for is if you wanted to use a single wire as a wire vertical. There's a number of antennas out there at the moment that are essentially a fiberglass pole or other support structure that are using a specific length of wire as a vertical antenna, like 43 feet is a common one. It's a non-resonant length, and that length of wire seems to tune relatively well on 40 through 6 meters with a feed point tuner like this. Feed point tuner is a more efficient way to make a match with the transceiver than it is having the tuner at the end of the coax cable where the radio is. And some people like the idea of being able to have that outside and have it do it like that, with the wire on the end, than having it inside the radio room.
So let's talk about the ground connection. There's a ground lug there. What is the tuner looking for when it comes to ground?
Okay, so the ground connection can be used one of two ways. One, obviously, is you could just ground it off to a ground rod, which is probably not that all that practical. But what it actually can be used for is either a counterpoise or a radial system. So essentially, when you have a vertical wire antenna, you want a counterpoise or a radial system to be at the ground side of the antenna as well. And what this nut does essentially is allow you, for example, if you want to make it real simple, you could just put like a quarter wave counterpoise wire, a single radio along the ground, or if you wanted to get a little more sophisticated with it, you could put several radios out at the same time for the vertical.
So you talked about the 43-foot vertical wire, or mostly vertical wire, that you would connect to this tuner outside. What would be the shortest length of antenna wire that this tuner could handle and still give you reasonable performance?
Okay, so the specs for the tuner are for 7 megahertz and higher, up through 6 meters, it's 10 feet. For 80 meters, it's 26 feet. I think most tuners are probably going to have a fairly tough time being able to match a short and long wire 3.5 megahertz, and this one isn't any exception.
So, I mean, there are practical physics limits to how well or how short you can make the wire. And obviously these counterpoise wires that you can connect to that ground terminal, counterpoise terminal, can really improve the performance.
It can really improve the performance, yes. If for no other reason than one thing that radios or counterpoise wires will do for a vertical antenna is simply lower the feed point impedance. I mean, it's actually easier for these boxes like this that's an external tuner to match a low feed point impedance than a high one. Vertical antennas tend to have a fairly low characteristic feed point impedance to start with, and the counterpoise radios will probably just give this thing a better shot at making a match for whatever frequency you want to use it on, particularly if you're using a shortened wire as the radiator.
So let's talk about price, Scott. With the two boxes, you've got the inside box, the outside box. How much money are we talking about, Scott?
Okay, so the two items have to be purchased as a pair. They are sold separately in case you wanted to purchase another control head for a second radio. The outside piece of the box I'm holding here is $329. The control heads for each of the various transceivers shown here are $99 per radio.
So let's go back to antennas. 160 meters, tough for guys to get on 160. I mean,
yeah.
it especially with, HOAs, restricted areas, small backyards, really, really tough. What do you think is the shortest amount of wire for the vertical piece? And then what would you recommend for the counterpoise on 160?
Boy, that's a good question. I'm not sure what the answer is because they actually don't spec a minimum wire length for 160 meters. Now, generally, you'd have to think that probably about whatever 1/3 of a quarter wavelength is. What's a quarter wavelength on 160? About 132 feet times 0.33, 40 feet. ish. Again,
Right.
your 43-foot wire might possibly be resonant and be tunable with this thing on 160. Probably any lower than that, it's going to be hard, though.
Yeah, you obviously anything more that you could get above 43 feet would be helpful, even if it was horizontal. I mean, just having the wire there will give the tuner a shot. What about the counterpoise on 160, Scott?
Now, it's the same thing. The thing with counterpoise wires or radial wires is that, as if not only with a remote feed point antenna tuner like this, but really with any antenna, is you got to put down as much wire as you think you can put down. I mean, in an ideal world, you'd put down a bunch of quarter wave radials for whatever the band of interest in is. Realistically, you know, if it's 132 feet, I'm not sure how many of those you're going to be able to get in, you know, in one shot. Sorry about that. My phone just blinked off for a second. Still with me? Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah, so, you know, at 132 feet, I don't think it's realistic you're going to be able to get a whole bunch of radials down. Again, with counterpoise, not unlike with end-fed half-wave antennas, you want to just put down as much wire as you think you can get away with.
Right. And the great thing about it, and you pointed this out a few minutes ago, is getting the tuner at the feed point of the antenna is much better, because now the coax isn't in the mix when it comes to the tuner, and isn't in the mix when it comes to radiating. And, you know, hopefully, you know, there's some choking that goes on, so the coax is not part of the antenna. What's the availability like of this tuner?
Okay, so we've got them in stock here, and we have just shipped you at DX Engineering the first shipment of both the control heads and the tuner units themselves. So I would assume that you'd probably have them up on the website this week.
Yes, boy, and looking forward to it too. This looks like a really good solution for the 100-watt radios, and really important, though, as you described, if you're going to run FT8, it's got to be 30 watts, no more.
Yeah, that's correct.
You know, that's just really important to pay attention to that. And I know guys sometimes will try to push the limits, but let's talk about Matt Tuner as a company. How has the relationship been, and, you know, are you excited about, you know, where you're going here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, things have been going great with these guys. We started 2019. They were an unknown in amateur radio. A mutual friend introduced me to the owner of the business. And frankly, 5 years ago, he just wasn't doing anything. I mean, they weren't doing any business in the U.S. They were selling some stuff in the Far East. And I basically just told him, give me a chance to try to get this going for you. Like I've done with other things that we have distributed here in the United States, or I've been doing throughout my career in this business. I just said, I need 12 months. We don't need an agreement. I just give me some time to try to get this going. And fortuitously, what happened near the end of that 12-month period was when the pandemic hit and we had everyone stuck at home. And the sales of the tuners started to steadily climb. And now, as you can see, we and you are selling quite a few of those.
Yeah, and you know what? I was looking at the customer reactions and some of the reviews, and they're quite good for this product, Scott. So I think that speaks volumes as well. The guys are enjoying their experience with the tuners, and we're really excited to get these on the shelf. It's going to be a real race to see if we can get them on the shelf in time for field day.
Oh yeah. Well, how far are we away? One weekend plus a couple days.
Right.
Yeah, it's gonna be tight.
Gonna be tight, but boy, this just seems like a great way to you know, throw up a wire in the tree and get on and work some HF during field day. And you say that the tuner can even get down to 6 meters too.
Yeah, it does operate on 6 meters as well. That's correct.
So, you know, some of these sporadic E and even F2 openings on 6 meters, you might have some fun with the tuner. Well, Scott, thanks so much for coming on today to talk about the new MAT 50 tuner. And we're looking forward to getting some customer reaction, and then looking forward to having you back on to talk about some of the other new products at Vibraplex.
That'd be great. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Thanks again, Scott. And thanks to all of you for watching, and get ready for field day. It's coming up here real quick. We're about 10 days out, so field day will be here. And but this weekend, get on the air, have some fun, test everything out. Until next time, 73 from DX Engineering.
Bye, Tim. Thanks.
We may just have to hang up, Scott, because I think headquarters is dropped off. So
Okay.
we'll hang it up. Okay.
All right. See you later.
73.
Bye.